Hello everyone, my name is Sanjay and I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you. I'm a marketing executive at Upside Learning and your host for the webinar. Thank you for attending our webinar on creating responsive e-learning with Fred. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. You will be receiving the recording of the webinar after the completion of the broadcast via an email. We have some polls lined up for you as well during the course of the webinar, so please feel free to participate. And we have a brief survey at the end to help us improve your webinar experience in the future. And lastly, feel free to ask any questions from our experts using the chat facility. In case we aren't able to answer any of your questions, we will try to answer them in our blog. If you wish to tweet about anything we're talking today, use hashtag #ULWebinar. That's hashtag #ULWebinar. Alright, now for some quick introduction about Upside Learning. For almost 10 years, we have been helping organizations of different sizes and types to improve performance through better learning. With our head office in India, we serve clients based in the UK, USA, Australia, Middle East, North Africa, and other countries. A wide range of innovative learning solutions includes Upside LMS, a multi-award winning learning management system, Upside to Go, a mobile performance support platform, and custom learning solutions for desktops, tablets, and smartphones. We have been recognized and awarded by Brandon Hall, TrainingIndustry.com, Deloitte, CLO, Apex, Red Herring, and have won the Best e-learning team of the year for 2013 by eLearning Age Awards. In all, we have won over 30 awards and recognitions to date. Alright, so let's get straight into it. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the speakers, Amit Garg, Director of Custom Learning Solutions, and Gira Bellare, Associate Vice President of Learning Design for Upside Learning. Amit, over to you.
Thanks, Sanjay. Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this session on creating responsive e-learning with Fred. Are you able to hear us all right? If anybody is not able to, please do type it in the chat window and we'll see what can be done there. Okay, let's move ahead. The agenda for today is as follows. We look at the multi-device world that we are currently living in and what are the various implications. We'll then jump into responsive e-learning. What is it and why is it required? We'll introduce Fred and briefly run through the key features of Fred. Fred is, by the way, our framework for responsive e-learning development that our teams have been using internally at Upside Learning to create responsive e-learning for clients. And then we'll look at the key challenges and considerations in creating responsive e-learning and how Fred really resolves many of those. Let's get started with a couple of poll questions. The first one being, how many devices do you use in a day? Just count all devices that you use, whether for personal or for professional use. 1, 2, 3, or more than that. We'll give it another 5 seconds for everybody to poll in. All right. Very interesting. I think we have 47% people saying they use 3 devices. 38% use more than 3. Nobody is using just 1 device. So I think if you were to take an average of this, you would be landing at about 3, 3.5, somewhere in between. Excellent. Can we hide these results and move on to the next poll, which is on which OS do your devices run? iOS, Android, BlackBerry, Windows, or other, and you're free to choose more than one. Let's give it another 5 seconds for everybody to vote in. Excellent. If we could close the poll now. Yes, so there we are, about 47% people saying Windows. Of course, that's largely the desktop or the laptop that you use. And then the next one is iOS, 29%. 18% people use an Android device and 6% using BlackBerries. Of course, there would be overlap. There was no others, so of course there would be overlaps in this as well. But if you could hide these results, we'll move on. Okay. That essentially points out to the multi-device world that we're living in. We all have more than 3 devices on an average. And we have varied operating systems that we're looking at. And typically these devices could be, and we didn't poll for that, could be varying between a laptop being more standard, a laptop or a desktop, and the others could be mobile phones or tablets or all 3 in many cases. Just a quick snapshot of some survey data that was released in January on American adults by Pew Internet. 91% of American adults have a cell phone. 55% have a smartphone. 42% have a tablet. And a little surprising bit, 25% of all American adults use only their phones to access the internet. Of course, there is an overlap between the cell phone and the smartphone. It would be a subset only. But then if you see the tablets, there is certainly an indication of multiple device usage over there as well. Also, if you look at the research that was published by Google a couple of years ago in 2012 on multi-screen world, they talked about a few key things that came out of that report were context is really driving the device choice, which is literally made up of the time you have on hand, the goal you want to accomplish, the location you are at, and the attitude or state of mind at that moment. And that would possibly resonate with every one of us, the way we use our smartphones, when do we pull them out, when we are doing some micro tasks, we are getting bored, etc., etc. And so those are the moments where you really use your smartphone. If you're in office, you might be using it parallelly to your other devices. Maybe you look up on smartphone and you do the task on your desktops. The Google report also pointed out at sequential screening, which is becoming very common. 90% of us use multiple screens and we accomplish tasks across devices. So we start on one device and we finish on another, and within the same day for most of us. Interestingly, that report in 2012 pointed out that smartphones kept us connected. The PCs or laptops kept us productive, while the tablets kept us entertained. So it was primarily seen as a device that was for media consumption just about 2 years ago. Recently, in 2013, I think in September sometime, at the Gartner Symposium, Eric Schmidt from Google said, it looks to us like the majority of enterprise computing is being done on mobile devices, in particular on tablets. So that's quite a big change from what tablets were seen to be doing in 2012 and how we are using them now. And that's taken everybody by surprise. Nobody really predicted that tablets would come in the enterprise in such a big way. So that brings us straight to the question, why are we looking at responsive e-learning? Here's a good quote from Jeffrey Van, who's the author of The Art and Science of Web Design. And he says, day by day, the number of devices, platforms, and browsers that need to work with your site, and he's obviously talking of websites, grows. Responsive web design represents a fundamental shift in how we'll build websites for the decades to come. I think there is a clue for e-learning as well. In my view, e-learning is really lagging the website design trends by, if not more, at least a couple of years. Responsive web design has been around for more than 2 years. Responsive e-learning is just finding its feet now. But the reasons why you would be looking at responsive e-learning would be very similar to this. It's the multiple devices, the multi-device world that's staring at us, and the realization that we really now live in that kind of multi-device world, with BYOD becoming popular, with tablets in the enterprise. And there was another indicator. Forbes recently listed multi-device as one of its key trends for 2014. So all of that, facts and figures around multi-device, I think responsive is an area that we need to look at. Another poll, just to gauge how much all of us know about responsive e-learning. Not much. Have just heard the term, know what it is, but have not tried. Have designed some responsive e-learning, have designed a lot of responsive e-learning. Almost 80% of us have voted, and we'll close the poll now. It's about 40% of us have done some responsive e-learning design and development. So I'm sure what's going to come later in this webinar, you would be able to appreciate that very much. For the rest who have not even heard about it or just heard about it and not tried, I think you'll get some valuable information, and hopefully you can learn from our mistakes and learnings as we share the challenges of responsive e-learning. Okay, if we could hide these results and go on to a quick, if I can quickly show what is responsive just for everybody, just to bring everybody the same level. I'll just show you our own website. This is Upside Learning's website. Just notice the menu here and the banner, how it is. Of course, it keeps moving, and how the key products are laid out as you scroll down. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the width of, if you can see dynamically, the menu and the logo and the banners, everything is getting shifted, and till here it is sensing a tablet which is in landscape mode. The moment you get here, this is the view that you will get on a tablet in portrait mode. So if you can see, the menu has come below the logo to give it a little more space. The products and services have been laid out differently, and everything else gets adjusted. If you were to further squeeze this to a mobile size, so this is obviously a very large mobile and maybe a portrait mode of smaller tablets. But if you were to look at smaller sizes, you'll find the menu gets clubbed into this button where you can click and open it, and then with further clicks you can go in, and everything else gets readjusted. So if you see, the banners have remained, but the text which was there on top of banners have come down. The products and services are now one below the other, and everything else. So it's almost like a single column layout. And if you go down to the lowest level, this is how it looks. Now that's really what we are saying responsive is. A site that really, or a site or a program that really responds to the size of the device. So just a quick screenshot here. If you again notice, the layout of the banner has changed on all the 3 devices, and the layout of menu changes. The images get resized dynamically, and all the other information below the banners is also getting restructured. Now, before I move forward and talk about responsive e-learning, can we get a quick view of what do you think responsive e-learning would be useful for in your organization? To reach out to mobile shop floor workers, to allow employees to access e-learning on their own device, to allow employees to access e-learning outside office hours, or to make compliance training programs more convenient to complete. Let's give it another 5 seconds. Okay, so about 2/3 of us voted on that, and we have 72% saying it allows employees to access learning on their own devices, which is just an indication of the growing BYOD trend and how we're making things accessible on all sorts of devices. But yes, for everything else, there is very close to 50% uh, uh, choices that have been, 50% of us who voted are really looking at achieving all of the others as well. In effect, yes, all of these are, we can close the poll and move, please. Yes, so, and we'll come to the benefits of responsive e-learning in a moment. Let's just define, for the sake of, everybody's, coming to the same term. Responsive e-learning, in a very simple sentence, is e-learning that responds to device size. As we just demonstrated with the website, your e-learning, if it is responding in a similar manner to the device dimensions, that is what is responsive e-learning. You may compare it with something called adaptive sites or adaptive e-learning if somebody were to create that. The key difference being responsive will be fluid layouts. So it through media queries, it senses the size of the window that it is opening on regularly, while a fixed layout, and there could be many fixed layouts, which senses for once what is the size of the device and gives you a layout. So it doesn't change dynamically. And if you were to look at, and get more clarity between responsive, fixed width, etc., you may look at a site called Liquid Appsive. I'm just sending it to everybody, that link on in chat window. Just look that up, and you'll find a very clear, precise explanation of what is the difference between fixed layout, fluid layout, responsive, and adaptive sites. And that's the same definition that will apply to e-learning as well. Though e-learning may not be as simple as website, and this last poll question of the day would highlight that. Does exactly the same content need to be delivered on all devices? And I think what we are trying to understand from our audience here is, what you are delivering on desktops, do you think the same thing should be delivered on even mobile phones? Yes, no, and maybe not sure. Okay, about 75% of us have voted. We could close. And we see about 40% saying yes, 42 actually, and 39% saying no. The rest are not sure. So it's almost half-half, which is a quite a good representation of how how the debate around this has been going on the web. In our view, the world is kind of divided on this. Whether we should give a full version or maybe a truncated version on mobile devices. People who say yes, that means yes, you should give a full version, versus people who say no, you should not give a full version. And here are the reasons. Number one being, people use people are used to the full version. So if you are a desktop website or a desktop application or desktop something that you are going mobile, then a lot of people who've been using your previous websites are already used to the layout, where the buttons are, and they search for those when they go onto the mobile website as well. In fact, studies have shown that those kind of websites, when they have a desktop version link available at the bottom, people just go and click that first and they keep zooming in because they know where they want to go, and they are really looking to, they're not willing to learn a new navigation structure and a new arrangement on mobile device. They just want to get the stuff done if they are used to the website already. Another reason, as we saw in the survey for American adults, about 25% of them use only mobile phones to access the internet. In that case, then it makes sense to give them the full website or the full experience or the full e-learning as well on mobile devices. Let's look at what's being said on the other side. Mobile context is important. Now, this is something which is critical when it comes to mobile learning, and we really believe that context is very, very important in mobile learning. So if that is the primary reason that one is to consider, I think we should not give a full version on mobile devices. Also, because of the bandwidth considerations, etc., sorry, you may want to give a lighter version on mobile devices and not load and choke your learners' bandwidth with a very, very heavyweight solution. Now, just to give you some instances where you could possibly give a full version and not give a full version, because I think this is a debate that you'll need to have internally and see on a case-to-case basis if this works in this situation. So let's say when you are targeting just desktops and tablets and not smartphones, and this could be a very real situation where organizations have distributed tablets to their workforce, especially Salesforce, and they are expecting them to access their business applications on those tablets apart from accessing the same thing on desktops. Then you are looking at delivering even e-learning on just desktops and tablets. In that case, yes, a full version might make sense. Most tablets, even the 7-inch ones, are really meant to access the whole websites. So they are supposed to give you the full experience. So you may want to give a full e-learning program on those. Or if you are trying to get higher completions on, let's say, compliance courses, which if that's an objective, you're not able to get completions from your mobile workforce, and by responsive e-learning, that is the gap that you're trying to address. Yes, you should give full courses for even mobile phones and tablets. And in a situation where you are focusing more on resources, providing short nuggets of content which the learners or your staff can access when they want. So it's not a course that you're focusing on. It's not a curriculum. It's a resource. You've created and kept it somewhere which is searchable and accessible when they need, just at the point of need. If that's the situation, yes, you may actually even begin with mobile first rather than looking at desktop first. But then you can deliver almost the same content or exactly the same content on all devices. On the other hand, if you're doing, let's say, a desktop software simulation, you would not want to deliver the same thing on mobile devices because the environment itself is going to be different. It's going to be large screen layout, and you don't really want it to be learned on a small device like smartphones. So in our view, I think you need to take a debated call on this. You have to have a discussion internally on a case-to-case basis whether you want to give a full version on mobile device or not. Looking at the key benefits of responsive e-learning, of course, the reach becomes enhanced, and you could possibly see higher uptake of your e-learning with that enhanced reach, as people are now, especially mobile workers, are now able to access your e-learning programs. A single source, technically this is all a single source program when you create responsive e-learning like the website I was showing, and then that leads to cost effectiveness in creation, in maintenance, and also in providing content consistency across devices. If you are delivering your responsive e-learning through LMS, you could track the completions and scores across devices, and it could also bring in sequencing the kind of sequencing that the Google report was talking about and what you would possibly experience in something like a Kindle. So if you were to finish or actually leave a book in between on one device, you could actually access the same book from the same place on another device, which is essentially bookmarking that's allowing that. And same bookmarking can be used through an LMS to allow your learners to switch from one device to another and continue their learning experience. At this stage, if I could introduce Fred, which is our framework for responsive e-learning design. And it's essentially an HTML, CSS, JavaScript based framework which helps create responsive e-learning easily, faster, cheaper, and more reliably. I'll quickly look at the business benefits of Fred and then the key features of Fred. The 6 business benefits that we have identified for Fred, and starting from the left side, is consistent and complete user experience. Once again, you can deliver the same content, the same set of interactions, maybe modified for different devices, but yes, the engagement level and the kind of activity the learner has to do, that would be very similar. Efficiency in production of responsive e-learning, because this consists of templates which have been tested and worked on. They have been created in such a way that the elements are themselves responsive. You don't have to work on that again and again. It gives you efficiency in creating responsive e-learning. Customizability is a great feature that most developers want. You know, when you give an authoring tool to developers, they normally hate it for the constraints that it poses and the rigidness that it comes with. And you can't really go ahead and change things in that because you don't know what will change, you know, what impact it would have at various other places in the software. With a framework like this, which is developed by our team, they would understand exactly what changes they could make, and customizations to templates to suit client projects would be much easier. The framework also brings in reliability, again, because it's been used for many projects and we've tested it time and again. So there is this reliability that you would have that you would not get when you're creating a custom e-learning program out, you know, from HTML or any other open framework. Effective content management, which is the same as a single source benefit that we were talking of course, Fred leverages on that. And cost effectiveness in doing all of that because of the efficiency and reliability it brings in and the single source that it leverages. There is cost effectiveness in creating responsive e-learning through Fred. I'll go through the key feature list quickly, as some of these would be also taken up by Gira in her discussion on the challenges and perspectives on how to resolve those. I'll just quickly rattle through this list. There's a multi-device support, which is of course the first thing that you would expect from a framework like this. But the key advantage that I would want to highlight there is that it brings in a mix of HTML4 and HTML5 programming. And that's been done largely to support all sorts of browsers that are available today. The fact is that today most of the responsive e-learning that is being initiated is being done primarily for desktops, and then tablets and smartphones are only secondary devices. I mean, we've heard most of our clients simply say, can we do this e-learning also on tablets or also on smartphones? So which essentially means desktops are still the primary devices on which it's going to be used. Now, if that is the case, you may very much have lower version browsers as well, which will demand a non-HTML5 code, especially if it is IE. So you have to have fallback options, which is what we have created in this, while creating multi-device, multi-browser support. It has a rich template library with interactive, engaging structures, and which have been created for all sorts of device combinations. So you simply have to use those to create great looking courses and more effective courses which will work on all devices. It has responsive menu which will automatically detect the device and will be presented accordingly. It supports various kinds of multimedia including audio, video, and SVG animations or sprite sheets, which Gira will again talk of, and Canvas. It also brings in multilingual support, so you could have even the double byte characters and the right to left languages. Also, because of the way we have structured Fred, you could deliver it straight off the website or through an LMS or even as an app. So what you could do is you could package it through PhoneGap and create it as an app and deliver it through app stores, which could be then downloaded and used by learners. It is standards compliant, so SCOM 1.2, 2004, AICC, TINCAN, all of them are there in that, and it is accessibility supported. It also has social media integration at a very basic level at this stage, where you could, from the buttons, if you have included them in your programs while you published it, you can share it on Facebook, you could share it on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and you can also like it. If you were to create a Facebook page for the course, people can, whoever is taking, so if there is an open program that you have, it could be then liked on Facebook and can help more social interactions around it. And it gives you developer aids, which is crucial for developers, where you have system logs, which is essentially like the testing page that comes up. It captures all the information about the browser, the device that it is working with, etc. So we can identify what could be the issues if there are any problems. And a communication log between the LMS, LRS, so we know exactly what to do if we have to make it work with a specific configuration of LMS or LRS. So that's about Fred. I'll let Gira pick up on the key challenges and considerations. I'll just hand it over to Gira. Just one moment. Excellent. Gira, you are in?
Yes. Thanks, Amit.
Brilliant.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Right. So as Amit has been mentioning, we have a responsive e-learning development framework called Fred, and well, it's finally in good shape for the beta release to our internal teams. So it's been quite a journey getting this far, and I suppose, as with any other journey, well, we've had challenges, we've had disasters, successes, a lot of arguments, despairs, joys, but at least I'm happy to say that at no point was there any bloodshed. And of course, a journey like this, I don't think we would ever actually say that we've arrived. So we will want to, and we will need to keep improving Fred. So I'm sure that the journey will continue. Any new responsive e-learning development project will face challenges, especially in the initial phases, until the framework gets stabilized and becomes more robust. So since we've already gone through some teething pains, we thought we could share some key considerations and challenges with you. And these would be related to browser and platform OS device combinations, usability, content display and treatment, standards and compliances, and development process. These challenges are a mix of our experiences, so there'll be some ID instructional design challenges in there, some graphic design points, programming, QA and testing, and project management points. Okay, so let's start with the browser platform OS device combinations. So I think the challenge there, quite simply, is the sheer number of combinations. You know, if it's going to be responsive, it's got to work on every device. So I think, as Amit mentioned before, maybe not quite that, but close enough. As a part of project scoping, we do try to narrow down and identify a narrower set of target devices, or maybe within target devices to identify which are a primary set of devices. But nevertheless, it normally or usually leaves quite a wide field. So our learners would view the e-learning, the responsive e-learning, through browsers, unless it happens to be packaged as an app. And today, there's such a wide variety of browsers available, so it's a challenge to display the same content in the same manner exactly the same manner or a similar manner and achieve the same behavior. Browsers, some of the browsers tend to interpret or render content in a slightly different way. So I think one of the things here is that as a programmer, you need to be able to code differently for different browsers. So we just have a very, very small example here. Different statements or different properties used by different browsers for a particular action. So in this case, it's to size a box, either two different types of boxes. And depending on whether you're looking at Safari and Chrome or Mozilla or other browsers, your line of code would have to differ slightly. So that these are things then that you need to know and to need to take care of while coding. So you need to take care of different browsers, but then how are you supposed to know which browser is being used to access the e-learning? Well, every browser running on a device sends information about itself as well as the device on which it's running to the network, to identify itself to the network. And it sends that in something which is called a user agent string. Again, each user agent string is going to be unique. And if there's quite a large number of combinations, target combinations, that means there's a large number of user agent strings that a developer or a programmer has to be aware of. He has to know each and every one of them. So assuming that, well, you've coded for different browsers, you've identified and coded for them, how do you know that it's working properly? So what we found while testing our responsive e-learning was that it takes a longer time. Testing is a longer process. It takes more time. It tends to be more complex and more intricate. And again, because there's so many combinations to cover. It can also be costlier because ideally you would want to test on as many of the actual devices, the actual physical devices as you can. We did try simulators, and they can be reasonably useful, but they may not always give 100% accurate results. So really the safest bet is actual devices. And yes, it can be difficult to have a setup where you have all possible actual devices. But in that case, even within the range of actual devices, perhaps targeting the primary devices or the ones which are most popular or the most commonly used amongst the user group could again be a way to go to make testing effective. Okay. Another challenge related to browsers has to do with lower versions and specifically Internet Explorer. So last heard, Microsoft, I think, plans to phase out IE6 in April of 2014. And the use of IE7 and IE8 is also declining. Given that, we still continue to hear IE8 as one of the targeted browsers. And one of the reasons for that could relate to what Amit was mentioning earlier, that responsive e-learning is still relatively young and tends to be looked upon as maybe an extension to traditional desktop learning. So now, yes, I want it to run on desktops and tablets and also, desktops and also tablets and smartphones. So because of that also run on type of an approach, we expect that IE8 would remain a target browser for a while, which is why we've decided to code our framework in that way so that we support older versions. The problem with IE8 though is that it doesn't support HTML5 elements. Okay. So in that case, if you detect that the learning is running on IE8, you would need to think of what could be the alternative treatments and the fallbacks. Okay. So as Amit mentioned, again, we use a mix of HTML4 and HTML5, which allows us to support lower versions of browsers. One of the additional checks we decided to put into place, and which is a good idea for I think, any type of course actually, not just responsive course, is to have a system check, which clearly tells you if your device or your browser is not meeting the minimum requirements. Again, there's a couple of options. In our case, we decided that the e-learning simply won't run. So that's to avoid the learner having a suboptimal experience. Another option could have been just display a message that says that some of the parameters or specifications are not being met, and you may have a less than optimal viewing experience, or there may be certain things that do not display as they were intended to, and then let the responsive content run. So here's an example of a couple of screenshots. The one on the left is what would display if your system complies completely, and in the one on the right you can see that IE7 was the browser used to access this responsive learning. So that's not a supported browser. So in this case, when you close the system check, you would not get an option to view the course or to enter the course. From browser compatibility point of view, we also took care to design templates. So you need to design templates whose treatment can change or can adapt based on the browser version. So for example, here on the left we have a carousel interactivity. So it's got sort of that sense of depth, and it will have a particular rotating animation. Now because IE8 doesn't support HTML5, we can't have that type of interactivity on IE8. So in that case, if IE8 is detected as the browser, the treatment is changed just a little bit. So you can see on this in the screenshot on the right, it's all at one dimension, one layer, and there would be left and right buttons which would simply then slide in or change the display. There's no rotating animation. Okay. And of course, if IE8 is the target, then we'll ensure that we test it on actual devices with that browser. One more thing to keep in mind regarding browser and all the combinations is about video and audio formats. So again, because every browser doesn't support every video or every audio format, you end up then having to load videos and audios depending on the target browser. So what we found was that MP4 and OGV videos and MP3 and OGG audios, by using those two, we were able to cover most of the browsers. So Opera, for example, doesn't support MP3 and MP4. Neither do older versions of Firefox, versions 21 or below. So if the e-learning is going to be viewed on those, then through programming we would ensure that either the OGV or the OGG formats are loaded. Now that given, that works in terms of functionality. However, you're loading 2 versions of every video and 2 versions of every audio file, which can affect the package size. So not necessarily a cause of concern, but then some LMSs do have limits on upload sizes. So we just have to be careful to check against that. Okay, let's move on now to another challenge, or key consideration rather, usability. And 2 things that come up here are touch friendliness and navigation. Both tablets and smartphones are touch devices. So the 2 most important things to ensure then are that the interactive elements are large enough and far apart enough to be comfortably selected. This is an aspect that can also cause a lot of debate, because just from the style or the look and feel point of view, it might just happen that a smaller button looks sleeker, so it looks nicer. Or perhaps putting buttons closer together, again, gives a better look and feel. But then for usability, well, it's a balance. You've got to strike that balance. With touch devices, we also need to remember to use gestural navigation where possible. So in addition to providing buttons, for example, we could also code in support for a swipe gesture for tablets and smartphones. We could use that for navigating between pages, or for an interactivity which is within one page. Now, supposing you choose to implement a swipe type of a gesture for navigating an interactivity on a particular page. In that case then, having a swipe for changing pages could cause a conflict. I mean, there could be a clash there. So in that case, you could probably look at introducing a new gesture maybe a two finger swipe for changing pages, and a one finger swipe gesture for changing displays within the page. So here's an example of that. On a desktop, this is a scenario, so it's divided into 10 scenes. So on a desktop, you could choose to navigate between the scenes by clicking on the buttons, which are below the visual, or by clicking on the left and right arrows that are on either side of the visual. Now the same thing on a landscape tablet. So same dimension, same resolution. We could also introduce a swipe navigation to switch between the scenes of the scenario. Okay, so as the device size reduces, we also need to decide how to handle global navigation. I think Amit already gave us some examples of that when he was discussing the Upside Learning website and how the navigation changed there. So similarly, in a responsive e-learning course, we would need to decide, do we want to shift the navigation? Do we want to group the controls? Do we want to layer? Do we need all navigation controls? Are some controls more commonly used than others? Okay. And from touch friendliness point of view, we also need to keep layout in mind. So now, for example, here we have a drag and drop interactivity. There's quite a lot of drag elements, yes. Again, on a desktop, that can work okay. Exactly the same layout taken onto a tablet with the same size and resolution. The drag elements are very close together. They're easy to grab with the mouse, but they would not be quite so easy to grab with the finger. So in that case, you would need to look at adjusting the layout and maybe spacing out the drag elements a little bit and making them higher. Sorry, not higher. Increasing their height to be able to make them more easily interactive. Okay, and just coming back to the navigation here. Yes, you need to decide then what to show, what not to show, what and how to group, and whether or not really everything is required. So Fred does have a responsive menu where controls are grouped and positioned based on device size. So now, for example, here on the desktop, all the controls are at level 1 or layer 1 of the navigation. iPad Portrait, same thing. If you look at the phone though, you can see that not the same set of controls is no longer visible because they have been grouped and layered. Okay. So this is how the menu would look. So again, the menu is available on clicking a first layer button on the larger devices, and it becomes visible on the smaller device also at a first level. Sorry, on clicking a first level button. Okay. Just to go back for a minute. You may also notice that there's an audio control which is there in the desktop versions, which is not present in the portrait in the Portrait iPad or in the phone. That's because again, with Fred we can choose to drop, show or hide certain controls depending on the device. So with a touch device like a tablet or a smartphone, most of us are used to using the device volume button to control the volume. So there wasn't really any need to have an additional volume button in the e-learning navigation. So that's conditionally dropped then. Okay. So for all the different types of interactions, we also need to focus on instructions, learner instructions with responsive learning. So a couple of different ways that they could be addressed. One is completely device neutral. So we just say select the button, for example. Select the button will work for buttons on the desktop. You can, to click them, and it works equally well if you have to tap a button on a tablet or on a smartphone. Another way is device appropriate, which is essentially conditional. So as an instructional designer, you'd write two sets of instructions. So click the button to view the example, and tap the button to view the example. and depending on what the target device is, the appropriate instruction would be displayed. The third way in which we could think about writing instructions is to try and see if we can make them task-specific, which is something that we did try with Fred. So here's an example of that. It just watch the video to learn about the 5 steps. So not click the play button, not tap the play button, but just watch the video, which works in a way as a uniform instruction across all device sizes and types then. Device appropriate instructions are easier to write, and in certain cases you need to be that specific. Device neutral or maybe task-based instructions can sometimes be challenging. And for task-based instructions, they can also be challenging when perhaps the nature of the interactivity is to structure and display content. So there's not that much of a particular specific task involved. One last point to keep in mind regarding usability is text readability. Text size will vary depending on the device resolution. So the higher the resolution, the smaller the text will look. At this point, we found that a font size of 16 pixels seems to give really good readability on all devices. We did actually put all the devices next to one another and checked on that. So here's what it looks like, font size 16 on all devices. Another option is then to size the font conditionally. So text size adjusts dynamically and proportionately based on whatever resolution is detected. And just a quick note here that while most mobile devices have accessibility settings on the device, it's still a good idea to include accessibility settings in the e-learning for learners, for example, to change text size or color or background color. So here's an example then of accessibility settings within the responsive output. And any change that you would make then through either these accessibility settings or through the device accessibility settings would take precedence. Okay. The third area we're going to touch upon is content display. In responsive e-learning, the treatment of content is transformed based on the device size and sometimes based on the browser too. So as an instructional designer, you need to think about how best to alter the treatment. And you've got to also keep the meaning and the relationship between content pieces the same across different layouts. You've got to ensure that a consistent look and feel is retained, and overall that there's a user-friendly experience. So in other words, we need to structure and visualize content accordingly. So this is just an example. You might have a process diagram that runs horizontally, which is good to show on a desktop. When you want to narrow that down onto a smartphone or a smaller display, horizontally not necessarily going to work very well. So you would need to transform that and rearrange that into a vertical layout. You'd also need to remember then to change your arrows, flip the direction of the arrows. Another example might be something like this, where you have labels pointing to different things. And as you can probably scale a little bit, in which case the labels may remain in place. But finally, when you reach a much smaller size, unless you consciously think of how the layout will change and how you need to rearrange the elements in relationship with each other, you might just end up with arrows or labels pointing to the wrong things. So in Fred, we do have a set of templates for content presentation. This is just one example of a simple text and image page. Different types of interactivities, and also knowledge checks, questions, quizzes that capture different types of content treatment transformation. Okay. We mentioned images earlier. So when rearranging content, we need to be quite careful when handling images. Is it okay? Can we just keep reducing the size of any image? Or do we need to come up with alternatives? Okay. Well, there's a couple of options here. The first is to scale the image down. And possibly, once you go below a particular size, to drop the image, not to display it if it's really a non-essential image. So I'm just going to switch to a different application for a minute. No, sorry. Okay, so can you see this demo, customer satisfaction?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this cloud, word cloud, is an image. So I'm just going to pretend to change the screen size here. So you can see that here the image is scaling. It's just becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, and I'm going to stop it right here. So scaling is one option, but you really got to decide how small can you go with that until it becomes unreadable. Another option is cropping. So rather than reducing the size of the entire image, you decide this is my focus area that I always want to display. And so I'm going to reduce the size by snipping things off around the edges, by cropping the image. So if I continue to drag this, right now you can see that on the left and right sides the cloud edges are visible. Now beyond a particular point here, we've cropped a little bit of the edges of the cloud. But it's still, everything is still readable. Now again, we continue to scale. We can see the whole of satisfaction there on the left-hand side. And at some point, the image got further cropped. So we lost a little bit more of it, but customer satisfaction is the focal point. And that has remained the focal point. And again, we scale some more. So that's a couple of ways in which to handle images. Okay. And this is another way. So here we have a large image. And what we've done is we've cropped parts of that image. So out of here we've taken what we want, so it's as if it's pre-cropped. And then those cropped images are also further scaled. So three different ways then in which to handle images and responsive content. Okay. To make the development process smoother, in our storyboarding templates, we do a storyboarding based on Fred templates. And then as IDs, we can specify where an image can or cannot be scaled, or if it needs to be cropped, then what the focus area should be. Okay. A little earlier, we mentioned transforming content treatment based on the target display area. Now, the fact that HTML technology is being used for responsive e-learning can restrict certain treatments. So again, we need to consider alternatives. So for example, supposing we have an animated story or an animated example to illustrate principles. There's characters and there's closely synced dialogues. So that would be difficult to achieve using pure HTML. So instead, in a case like this, choose to create an audio synced animation in Flash and publish it as a video in the appropriate format, and then call the video from HTML. So here's an example of that. This is within an interactive template, and we wanted to have an animation with a story. So we created that in Flash and included it as a video. And you can see that the video also then scales for each device. We'd also want to consider our audio strategy for responsive learning. So if you think of content which is being viewed on a desktop. So you can build up an animation, maybe you start with something in the top left corner, add something in the bottom right corner, then you move them both together and they merge into a third type of a visual. And all this is in sync with audio animation. So because the entire desktop is visible at one time, you get a coherent picture. And the inputs that you're getting from your visual and your auditory channels are matching. So it makes sense, it works. Now on a smaller device, there's a smaller display area. So if your content is animated, it may actually be getting built up below the visible or below the viewable area, or it may not even have loaded yet. So you might find yourself listening to audio narration and really wondering what on earth is happening because you can't see anything. So in order to avoid this, one strategy which we've used could be to have only introductory audio for each page, and where really we need closely synced audio to go in then for videos, as we discussed earlier. Fred does, I think Amit also has mentioned this, Fred supports a variety of multimedia components, audio, video, images, graphics, animations, and we can also look at different types of animations. So if you have short, looped, repeated animations, sprite sheets are one possible option. And if you're not targeting older versions of browsers, so if you're targeting only browsers that support HTML5, then SVG graphics and animations too. So in our demo, we have used sprite sheet animations for our navigation, for our GUI options. So this is an example of what the sprite sheet for the GUI looks like. Okay, while transforming content treatment for smaller devices, another aspect we need to keep in mind is layering interactivities for smaller devices. We limited the layers of interactivity to 1 or 2 on the larger device to ensure that the navigation on a lower size did not become too intricate. So that means then that we had 2 levels of chunking. So we did the first level of chunking for desktops, and then we did an additional level of chunking for smaller versions. I'm just going to switch screens again. So just to show you a couple of examples. And you see here also that the instruction doesn't tell you to click or tap, it just tells you find out more. So it's a task-specific instruction. Oops. Okay, so here you have a video that plays. Definition up front here and example video on click. Now, up to a certain point, yes, it can be scaled. And after that, the treatment itself changes. So here there's 2 levels of interaction. So one level to see the definition, and then one more click to view the video. Okay. This one I think we already saw. So here you can go through the scenario. You see the full visual with speech bubbles, thought bubbles. As you scale down to a smaller size, once you go past a particular point, we chose to extract the dialogues and just show the speakers, except in 1 or 2 places where we still felt that we wanted to show the entire scene. So here we broke up the treatment and just put everything into one non-scroll. Okay, and this one is accordion treatment, and in this case, this is something that can be done maybe when there's more text. So here, everything is at one level. And again, similar example, the definition and then the example. But here there's no video, there's just a textual definition. So those were just some examples. Chunking and organization of content can be looked at in 2 different ways, depending on how comfortable the target group of learners is with scrolling content on desktops. So if they're fine with that, or maybe if your e-learning is being created only for tablets and smartphones, then you could actually look at chunking larger chunks of information that scroll on all devices, just like websites. Okay. Amit has already discussed some of these, so I'll just run through them very quickly. Whether all content needs to or should be showed or made available on mobiles. So application simulations may not work well because you need to see the details of a screenshot. complex technical diagrams, again, it's important to see the details. You might have animated stories, scenarios where you need to see details of environment, objects, or text within that that needs to be readable, or maybe exploratory interactivities where you need to identify or locate different areas or objects to explore within the visual. So such types of content can be difficult, not impossible, but difficult to present effectively on a small device. So as a part of content analysis and design, it's important to be able to identify such content and devise either alternative approaches or to question whether to even include that content in mobile versions. Okay. Very quickly, standards and compliances. I think implementing SCORM or tin can compliance, and if the target LMS supports it, sequencing, the first time around in a new framework can be complex and time-consuming. Now, Fred is easily configurable to give SCORM or tin can compliant e-learning, responsive e-learning, for delivery on LMSs. Responsive e-learning can also be developed through Fred and packaged as an app with tin can or SCORM compliance. If it's SCORM compliance, there might be a certain amount of customization required to achieve that. There's also built-in provisions for accessibility to meet target standards and compliances. And last but certainly not least, just a quick word about the process. We found that creating responsive e-learning requires a much more fluid and iterative process. And yes, that does make scoping and pricing more challenging. But that understood, we feel it's important for us to tell our clients that the process may take more time. It may even cost more in the short run. But in the longer run, the approach can save a lot of effort and cost because you only have then the single source that needs to be updated or maintained. Responsive design itself is evolving, and so is the associated technology. So another thing to point out would be that output would be future-friendly for the most part, although some adaptation may be required if browser support or maybe HTML elements standards themselves change. Another thing we found process-wise that between instruction designers, graphic designers, programmers especially, we did a lot of sketching, a lot of discussions, interactions. There was a high level of interdependence to ensure that content was well laid out on all screen sizes, visually accurate, appealing, and structured. Interactivity was structured as required. So given that, we'd ideally like to include only core content and core visuals with an indication of sequence into the storyboards that we send for client review, and leave out layouts, treatment, details, and supporting visuals. We'd explain also that the development process would be iterative, and then we could send an updated version of the storyboard with the output. The updates could then reflect whatever changes were made during production, although we really don't anticipate that there'd be any major changes to the core content, to the visuals. And as mentioned earlier, we did find that testing took a longer time, as the output needed to be tested and then re-verified on many, many different combinations. Okay. So at this point, I think I'll hand back to Amit.
Thanks, Kia. I think we've just taken a little longer than we should have, about 10 minutes over the time that we had requested for. Sorry about that, but hopefully this was useful for you. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you have any queries or if you wish to get a more detailed demo of the framework, Fred, do write to any one of us. So we'll look forward to hearing from you. If you have any comments, thoughts, please feel to share that. If there are any quick questions and you want to type them in the chat window, we can take them up now. Thanks, John. Thanks, Bart. Paul asks, how much is the software? This is a framework, so I think what needs to be kept in mind is the difference between a framework versus a tool. So this is not really for non-developers. It is for developers. So I think we should have uh, a clear distinction between a framework and a tool there. So this is more of a framework, and I think we'll be using it more internally to help our developers achieve speed and efficiency and reliability in producing responsive e-learning for our clients. But Paul, if you wish to drop me a mail, maybe we could chat about that. Thanks, Catherine. But the framework can be installed locally, but at this moment we are intending to use it internally with our developers. But as I said, it does provide the benefits to our customers in terms of cost efficiency, reliability, and efficiency. So production efficiency. Devin, if you would like to send me a quick mail, let us connect offline to discuss. All right then. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Hope you have a good day, evening, night, wherever you are. And feel free to contact us on our mail IDs as shown on the screen. Thank you.